Now this is more like it. This is what I'm talking about. Attack on Titan Season 4 Part 2 Episode 10 was a banger. And based on how this one went, I'm willing to believe that the one after it will be a banger as well. Now Flock was prepared. From the moment he suspected the John and Onyonkopon situation was a ploy, it seems like he was considering countermeasures against any would-be traitors. Now the whole reason the Avengers, as we'll call them, were here at all was for the sake of securing the flying boat necessary for them to make their way to Marley in time to contest Eren and stop the rumbling. Everything hinged upon the success of this plan, and the only reason the flying boat was still around was on account of the technological loss to be found in the wake of its destruction alongside the end of the rest of the world. And apparently it would take decades before they were able to restore that sort of thing, so fair enough, I can understand the hesitation, especially if their concerns were all based on assumptions. Not only that, but for the sake of ensuring the entire world besides them is in fact wiped out, they would need the flying boat to be most efficient. But the necessity of that obviously came second to the danger posed by those attempting to contest the rumbling. If nothing else, even with Eren being such a titanic force of epic proportions and virtually incomparable power, Flock knew that those opposing him would be his friends. So even if they couldn't overpower him, if they could manage to talk to him in hopes of changing his mind, everything they had fought for would be jeopardized. And remember to subscribe to the channel with notifications on. Suffice to say that for the Avengers, this mission was inherently difficult even with 5 of the 9 Titans on their side, along with Mikasa being a pseudo-shifter of sorts as an Ackerman. But regardless, either way, a mission like this was child's play compared to their ultimate goal of stopping Eren, which they would be reminded of by way of the immense amounts of smoke to be seen over the ocean by way of the many colossal Titans. Past this, Annie would begin to take charge, expressing that for this to work, they would need to eliminate all enemy forces simultaneously using all their combined might and weaponry. However, there would be a bit of reluctance to do so for various reasons. The first would be proposed by Mikasa in regards to the Azumabito potentially becoming casualties of such an ensuing conflict, although this would be disregarded by Annie considering the fact that the Azumabito had attacked their homeland, which is seriously ironic all things considered. However, Peak and later Onyonkopon would provide validity to this claim, as without the Azumabito mechanics, they would be unable to make use of the aircraft's wings. This situation was already difficult enough, but the reluctance of the Paradis members within the collective would only stand to add to that difficulty, as they did not want to kill any of the YEAGERISTS attempting to stop them, especially considering they had all known each other since they were cadets. Now in relation to this, Annie would be the logical leader of this operation and would immediately question if Armin had some grand plan to miraculously make all of this work, like how he did when it came to cornering her as a female Titan. But he had no such thing. It was either kill or let kill. Now Annie has been away for a while, so she may not know, but Armin in season 4 isn't exactly the genius we once knew him to be. Perhaps this was for the sake of emphasizing Eren's brilliance at this point, but yeah, Armin hasn't really felt all too brainy to me in a very long time. From which point Connie would express that their desire here was to save people, then wondering why they had to murder their friends to do so. And there it is, the harsh reality of what they are doing. To take down Eren and save the world would require sacrifices. They were not the sort of world-saving heroes that would get to walk away from all of this without any losses. They were not going to save the world in storybook fashion. And Connie is, with no disrespect, the least intelligent person here. And regrettably, that does include Gabi and Falco, because at the very least, they grew up in a more advanced nation. But in exchange for that missing intelligence, the guy wears his heart on his sleeves, and so when it comes to moral crossroads like these, having a person like that present is a very interesting thing, if nothing else. But hearing all this, Annie would begin to pull back a bit, understanding that how they felt could not be helped, and that they would be of no use in a situation like this, believing that unlike her and REINER, these guys probably would not have gone through with the destruction of the walls, which caused REINER himself to recall something Eren had said to him while the two were in Marley. As at the time, Eren confirmed to himself that the two were in fact the very same, which is to say that Eren's enactment of the rumbling, although certainly on a grander scale, was not much different from REINER's willingness to topple the walls, which is to furthermore say that the smoke goes both ways, from which point REINER would let the others know that they could stay behind and avoid engagement, letting them all stay out of sight for the sake of staying out of mind. But that didn't exactly make things any better, not really at least, as in that case, they would be turning a blind eye to the slaughter of their friends for the sake of stopping another, which isn't much of an improvement. Hange would now rejoin the others and declare that she had no intentions of sitting things out. Not only that, but the speed to which the rumbling was occurring was quite the surprise, and by now, the rumbling had made its way to Marley, and more specifically the closest cities in the northeast, much to the visible dismay of REINER and Annie. And now knowing this, Magath was furious and would take it out on none other than Yelena, who was just sitting there minding her own business. And this was pretty brutal, but it was enough for her to shift her stance to an extent and no longer desire death, and was willing to comply if she was permitted to follow along with them. from which point Magath would catch a glimpse of Gabi, who he seems to feel a sort of parental bond towards, and this would then provoke him to issue apologies towards these so-called devils among them, firstly addressing them all by their names. He would then do the same in regards to the warriors of Marley, denouncing what he had done and furthermore apologizing to them all with his head lowered, asking them to all close their eyes until it is over. However, Armin would refuse. If this was going to happen, they would be getting their hands dirty as well. And at that, the whole lot of them, besides Falco at this point, have a whole lot of blood in their hands. It just so happens that by being a part of this, the members from Paradis will be made to kill their own people, which, unless you're looking at things from the perspective of them all being Eldians as opposed to their regional upbringings, is something the others have never been made to do. All the while, Floch was being an absolute villain as he spoke to Kiyomi. And at this point, he had already killed some more people who you might imagine lashed out. But despite these circumstances, Kiyomi would keep it real with this man, letting him know that even if they eradicate the rest of the world and shrink things down, that would not inherently prevent their own people from killing one another. But listen, logic is like poison to a madman, and despite taking note of this point, Floch wasn't much of a fan of it and would subsequently place his weapon to the side of her head. Again, they were seeking to preserve the technology of the Hizuru. However, if they were to determine that ignorance in regards to such things was for the better, well, then there would be no need to keep those non-Eldians alive. But just before things escalated further in that regard, Armin from outside would cry out to Floch, expressing that the cart and armored titans were swimming away and in pursuit of Eren for the sake of stopping the rumbling. And so they would need the flying boat prepared by the Azumabito for the sake of stopping them. And my goodness, was this an unconvincing lie. At this point, the cart and armored titans alone would be useless against Eren and absolutely incapable of swimming that great distance in such a short span of time. A better lie would be one that includes the likes of John at the very least, considering Floch is bound to have his suspicions in that regard. And furthermore, one that includes Mikasa. Now that would most definitely be cause for concern on account of her connection to Eren. But moving on from there, we would have what for me was the best aspect of this entire episode, and that's Armin and Connie's interactions with Daz and Samuel. Two characters these guys have known since they were all scouts. Now they are minor characters, so if it has been a while since you have seen the first season, you may not remember them all too well, but yeah, they've all known each other for a very long time now and have fought alongside one another in some pretty precarious situations. And with these two being Jaegerists, to me, just makes that prior sentiment of Hange's in regards to all those who had died in the past denouncing Eren's path seem even stupider. But yeah, there were actually explosives strapped onto the flying boat as a precaution. Now Daz and Samuel would slow these two down and begin talking to them, admitting that they had been told the two were suspected of working with Marley to stop the rumbling. And when they denounced such a reality, the two, still uneasy, would choose to believe their longtime friends. Now mind you, Daz in particular has always been a character that has struggled with horrible anxiety, and so them gaslighting him like this only made it that much more painful. And even when Daz trusted them against his better judgment and disconnected the detonator, the guilt was written all over the faces of these two. And let me just say that the expressions to be seen in this episode were absolutely on point as opposed to the previous one. This was very well done in that regard. Now Floch would then consider all that had been expressed by Armin and was incredibly suspicious as things simply were not adding up. And so his ultimate decision would be to remove his concerns by killing the engineers. However, he would be stopped. And in the anime version, they added a bit of additional suspense by way of focusing upon the fall of a nearby chair prior to several shots going off. And those were essentially the shots heard around the world, as any hope of a peaceful solution was killed in that very moment. Kiyomi had Floch in a hold, and from there, all hell would break loose. Mikasa was about that action, and Floch would soon escape to let all of them know that these guys were traitors. From there, Daz would immediately go back to hooking up the explosives up to the detonator, as Samuel would shoot Armin several times over, all while knowing him to be a Titan shifter, so those shots would not be fatal. And based on their expressions and the words exchanged, this was an incredibly painful betrayal indeed. From there, however, as he battle Rajan, Reiner and Annie would pull up in brilliant fashion and shift into their Titan forms simultaneously. And this looks so cool, oh my goodness. Just behind the Beast Titan, the female Titan is my personal favorite, so to see her triumphant return like this was an absolute pleasure. When it comes to squashing ants and swatting flies, Annie is a beast and definitely proved that yet again. Now in the midst of these transformations, Connie actually managed to knock Samuel down, what would be followed by a bloodied Armin doing the very same to Daz before having a weapon pointed at him too. Samuel would continue to question their actions, wondering why they were doing what they were doing. It was now abundantly clear that neither side wanted to kill each other, but that's when Armin began to recall the words of Bertolt, that someone has to be the one to stain their hands with blood, only for Connie to remove the gun from Samuel's hands and shoot Daz dead, then doing the same to his friend Samuel despite his outcries. And so now they really knew what it was like to be traitors, to kill those who they once called comrades and friends. Yet another line has been crossed for the sake of what they believe in, and in doing such horrendous things, they can only hope that it was all worth it. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.